Hey guys, tonight we venture far from anything remotely cozy into a sun-bleached skeleton of a town called Whisper Gulch. You stand just off a gravel road that time forgot staring at a place where even tumbleweeds are too scared to roll. Dust curls up like breath from the cracked earth, and behind you your car has already disappeared into the shimmering heat mirage. It's just you now, you and the cabin. The air tastes like copper and pine sap. The scent is sharp, as if something's watching you through the trees. You hike the final 100 feet on foot, boots crunching dead needles. In the distance, the silhouette of the cabin emerges, not dilapidated, not destroyed, just waiting, its roof intact, its walls upright. That shouldn't be possible. The rest of the town is nothing but toppled beams and half-sunken outhouses. But this cabin still breathes. You probably won't survive this, but that's fine. You didn't come for survival, you came for truth. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see how many brave souls are wide awake with us tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The porch groans under your weight. You pause, 3 knocks, not from you, from the other side of the door. Gentle, deliberate, like someone knocking just to say, I know you're here. You freeze fingers on the brass handle, worn down to dull metal. The air is cooler here, like the cabin's leaking cold through its seams. The windows are shut. The curtains, oddly clean, sway just a little, as if from breath. You don't go inside yet. Instead, you walk the perimeter. Every step kicks up powdered rust from the soil. You find half a mining pick, a child's marble, and a boot still laced tight, split open at the sole, like it gave up mid-sprint. The back of the cabin looks toward the gulch. It's steep, and you can see the remnants of what must have been the main mine entrance. Now boarded up, chained and bolted, with rusted warning signs, do not enter, gas pockets. Closed since 1883. Yes, 1883. That year shows up a lot around here. You finally step through the door. It doesn't creak. It swings open too easily, like it was expecting you. Inside, dust floats in shafts of amber light, unmoving. Time has stopped here, or maybe it just got bored and left. The place is surprisingly neat. No critter nests, no cobwebs in your mouth. Just a small cot in the corner, a warped wood stove, and a table with 1 chair. On the table, someone or something has left a cup. Clean, dry, waiting. You sit. The walls are bare, except for a framed photo. 5 men in mining gear faces hard and squinting. One of them is circled in red ink. The others have been scribbled out violently, like someone couldn't stand to see their faces anymore. There's no electricity, but your phone has enough battery. You check your reception, no service, of course. So you do what any logical person does in a haunted cabin at dusk. You wait. The sun dips lower, setting fire to the window panes with gold. And then, just as the light dies, 3 knocks. This time from the back wall, the one facing the gulch. Your stomach drops. That wall is solid. There's nothing behind it but cold mountain rock. Historically, the Colorado mining boom of the late 1800s drew thousands of desperate men westward. Most towns like Whisper Gulch sprang up overnight, held together by booze, dynamite, and rumors of veins fat with silver. But not all of them made it into the history books. Some were erased literally by landslides, mine collapses, or things less explainable. Here's something quirky for your brain to chew on, while your spine tries to crawl away. In 1901, a prospector from New Mexico swore that Whisper Gulch never existed. He claimed to have grown up nearby and remembered a stretch of land that was always just wrong but had no buildings. When pressed, he added, "There ain't no town, just that damn knocking." Historians still argue whether Whisper Gulch was a legitimate mining town or an illegal camp erased to cover corporate negligence. Some say it's on record under a different name, others think the records were purged intentionally. Because what happened here wasn't just a collapse, it was a secret. Night settles in like a slow exhale. You light the oil lamp you brought just in case. You notice the glass of the lamp is already smudged, with a fingerprint too small to be yours. You don't knock back, not yet. You sleep eventually, lightly, the kind of sleep where every creak wakes you and every whisper from your own breath feels like an intruder. At 3:09 a.m., a cold wind sweeps through the closed cabin, and the knocking resumes, this time from the ceiling. You jolt awake, heart thrumming like a drum roll, just before the magician's trick. The ceiling above you is made of warped wooden planks, stained a shade darker than the walls. There's no attic, no crawl space, no possible place for footsteps or fists, but still 3 slow knocks, measured, patient, too deliberate to be a tree branch or the groan of settling wood. You lie there paralyzed, half wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of old tobacco and something sweet. Molasses, maybe, or decay, masked by sugar. The air feels thicker now, like you're breathing through cloth. You whisper to the ceiling, "What do you want?" Nothing answers, and yet you sense the cabin listening. The sun rises slow, painting the inside of the cabin in bruised peach and amber. You step outside, half expecting to find raccoon prints on the roof or some logical reason for last night's visitor, but the roof is clean, dusty, undisturbed. What is disturbed, however, is the dirt behind the cabin. There are drag marks, not fresh, not old either. Like something or someone was pulled feet first from the tree line toward the back wall of the cabin. You follow the trail with your eyes. It ends directly where the knocks began last night, at the base of the wall. You press your hand to the boards. Cold, too cold. There's something else too. The grain of the wood seems misaligned, like it was sanded over something beneath. You knock once. The echo doesn't bounce, it gets swallowed. Later that morning, you head into the nearest town 30 miles away and barely on the map. You find the only open diner, the kind with cracked red booths and a jukebox that hasn't worked since Reagan. You ask the waitress if she's ever heard of Whisper Gulch. Her hand stills mid-pour. "You stayed in that cabin?" You nod. She says nothing else, just slides your coffee over and whispers, "You should leave before Thursday." It's Monday. Naturally, you ask why. But she's already in the back, pretending to refill napkins that didn't need refilling. You start digging. The town library is in an old schoolhouse, staffed by a man who's at least 100 and smells like ink and mothballs. He doesn't talk, but he gestures vaguely toward the local history section. You pull books, old maps, scanned ledgers. Whisper Gulch did exist, sort of. But the references are inconsistent. The dates blur. Some maps label it Whispering Pines, others Miners Hollow. Here's your historical fact of the day in the late 1870s. Mining towns that didn't meet federal safety standards were often left off official records to avoid lawsuits. Many of these towns eventually collapsed, sometimes literally, and were absorbed into nearby jurisdictions without ceremony or remembrance. Whisper Gulch seems to be one of them. You find a journal entry. A real handwritten pen-on-paper account from a miner named Edwin Tillman. He describes the building of the cabin. Here's where things get quirky. Edwin claims the wood used to build the cabin came from a grove of trees that whispered in the wind even when the air was still. He writes that the foreman joked about it until he stopped joking, because every night after sundown the trees would knock on each other. By themselves, the logs used for the cabin were harvested anyway. Historians still argue whether these kinds of stories were metaphors for the psychological toll of frontier isolation, or if the men genuinely believed nature could talk back. You close the journal and rub your face. There's a note scribbled in the margin of the last page. The wood still knocks. I burn it every night, but the knocks always return. You drive back to the cabin just as the sun droops behind the mountains. This time you don't enter right away. You walk the perimeter again, but now you notice something new. The wildflowers don't grow within 20 feet of the structure. They bloom wildly across the gulch, even through old gravel, but not near the cabin. Nature avoids this place, and now that you feel stupid for not noticing it sooner, you open the door. It swings like it always does, quietly, obediently. You set your bag down and start poking around more carefully. In the floorboards near the stove, one plank is newer, less warped. You pry it up with the back end of a crowbar you found in the tool shed. There's a compartment, a tin box inside. Inside that three things: a rusted nail, long and thin, bent like it had been pulled from bone instead of wood. A leather pouch of old coins, each with a corner scratched off. A photograph of the same 5 miners from the portrait on the wall. But this time, none of the faces are scribbled out. There's just one word written on the back: debt. You replace everything as it was. At dusk, you sit by the fireplace. You light a small fire. You pretend you're calm. Then, at exactly midnight, 3 knocks. This time the sound comes from the floor, right beneath your chair. You don't scream, you're too tired for that now. Instead, you whisper, "I heard you." And the cabin sighs, not creaks, not shifts, sighs, as if relieved. You go to bed, the knocks don't return. But just before sleep takes you, you feel the corner of your blanket tug, and you hear a voice you don't recognize. Whisper, "He hasn't paid." Morning brings silence, but not peace. The air is still, like it's bracing for something. You open the door and step out, half expecting to see claw marks in the dirt, or boot prints that aren't yours. Instead, you're greeted by fog, not morning dew or mist, but fog heavy and deliberate, as though the land itself wants to hide what happened here overnight. Your breath puffs visibly, even though it shouldn't be cold in early September. Not at this altitude. But every foot closer to the old mine shaft, the chill deepens. You stare down into the gulch where the mine entrance rests like a sleeping mouth padlocked shut with a chain that could anchor a ship. The gas pocket warning is so faded it looks like it was written in ash. You stand there for a long time. Eventually, you do what no rational person would do. You climb down. The slope isn't steep, but it's treacherous. Loose rocks tumble under your boots. A lizard darts across your path and then turns back to the cabin as if even it knows not to linger. At the entrance, you examine the bolts. They're old, industrial. But here's the strange part. The padlock is new, shiny without rust. Someone's been here recently. You pull out your phone again. Still no service. You snap a few photos out of habit. Maybe you'll show them to a historian, or at least someone with less sense than you. When you zoom in, you notice something you didn't at first behind the slats. Barely visible is the tip of a boot. Not discarded, still attached. Now let's talk history. Because this mine, it's one of dozens abandoned after the 1883 Colorado mining bust, when silver prices crashed and safety violations became impossible to ignore. It's also one of the few with no death toll on record, which, let's be honest, is suspicious in and of itself. Mines always had deaths. If the record says 0, it usually means someone made the deaths disappear. You climb back to the cabin, but the fog doesn't lift. It just follows. Later that day, you visit the town's dusty historical society. It's inside an old church, windows boarded up, except for one stained glass panel showing St. Barbara, the patron saint of miners. She's holding a torch and a pickaxe. Her eyes are scratched out. The caretaker, a man named Clyde, who looks like he's never smiled in his life, agrees to speak with you. Sort of. Whisper Gulch, he mutters. Best to let the dead alone. You press. He shrugs and says town had 500 residents in 1882. Only 30 left by spring of 83. What happened, you ask? He scratches his chin. People say a shaft collapsed, took out the north tunnel. No survivors, officially. Then he leans in. But I heard from my granddad, and he heard from his uncle, some of them didn't die in the collapse. Some walked out, days later, covered in soot. Eyes gone. He gestures to his own face, but still moving. You swallow that detail whole, like bad soup, thick and hard to forget. Here's your quirky tidbit. There's a rumor among certain ghost hunters, yes, real ones, that Whisper Gulch is a time-bleed a place where moments repeat themselves for eternity. Not in an obvious way, like ghost trains or flickering lights. More like patterns. The same knocks, the same voices, the same dreams. Historians still argue whether such repetition is psychological product of isolated minds breaking down or evidence of something non-linear. That night, back in the cabin, you test something. You sit in the same chair. You wait until midnight, and then before the knocks you knock. 3 times, sharp and slow. Nothing happens. But at 12:03, 3 knocks answer you. Only this time from every wall at once. You stand. The air shifts. You smell dirt and sweat and gunpowder. The fire in the stove flickers, though there's no draft. Your breath fogs in the room, and you hear faint humming like an old mining song, off-key and distant. Then you hear footsteps, not boots, bare feet slapping gently against the boards above you, which is impossible. There is no upstairs. You grip the oil lamp and step toward the back wall, the one that hides the gulch. That's when you notice it. The wall isn't just wood. There are names scratched faintly into it, hundreds, maybe more, layered over each other in chaotic rows. Some clear, some half-burned. You find the circled name from the photograph, G. Harlan, and beside it, freshly carved, is your own. That's not metaphor. That's not poetry. It's there. The letters are still splintered at the edges. You didn't put them there. But they're waiting. You don't sleep that night, because around 2 a.m., the whispering starts. Low at first, just syllables, then a name. Your name. You don't remember falling asleep. You just remember waking up. The morning sun slices through the blinds in thin, accusatory strips, landing squarely on the floor beneath the table. And there in the dust are footprints, bare, small, child-sized, walking in circles around the cot where you slept. You sit up, heart a clenched fist in your chest, and look around. No one else is here, but something was. You follow the prints. They end at the fireplace. No exit, no chimney access. Low enough for anything to crawl in, just soot and cold stone. Curious now, you begin to prod. Behind the soot-caked bricks near the base, one of the stones shifts beneath your hand. Looser than the rest, You wedge your fingers behind it and pull. The stone gives way with a gritty sigh, revealing a hollow. Inside is a scorched leather-bound ledger, half-burned but intact enough to flip through. Most of the entries are mundane equipment logs, pay distributions, canary replacements. Because yes, they really did use those little birds in mines. But the last few pages shift tone. They list names more than you'd expect for a small operation. Each name is accompanied by a number and a word. Owed, unpaid, settled. The final column has an ominous heading burned at the edge, cleared with the R and E, almost illegible. You thumb through the final few pages. One entry reads, G. Harlan, Tools. Advanced payment defaulted. Cleared 11/3/1882. Below that, E. Tillman. Ledger damage debt unknown. Cleared 12/03s. Yagatat 1882. And then, blank space, witness, pending. Your fingers twitch. The ink on that last word looks newer. Here's your historical fact. Many early mining companies functioned more like predatory loan offices than legitimate employers. Miners were often paid in script tokens, only redeemable at company-owned stores, which conveniently overpriced everything. If a miner was injured or fell behind, their debts didn't vanish. Sometimes they were transferred to relatives or buried. And here's something fringe for your mental dessert. In Appalachian folklore, miners believed spirits of the earth demanded payment when debts weren't settled. They'd leave offerings in the tunnels, coins, buttons, teeth, even names scratched into wood or stone to appease what they called the hollow ones. Some of that lore made it west, especially here. Historians still argue whether these offerings were superstitious rituals or desperate attempts to avoid becoming the next debt collected. You stare at the ledger. The ink on pending is still a little wet. You toss the book aside. Bad move. It lands open on a new page. Your name is written there now, and under it, just one word cleared. You slam the fireplace shut and step outside, lungs burning for air that doesn't reek of old fire and judgment. But the air outside isn't better. It's still heavy. The birds have stopped chirping. The wind no longer rustles the trees. Even the insects, those annoying buzzers you didn't realize you missed, are gone. You walk out toward the gulch again, trying to shake off the fog in your mind. That's when you see it. In the grass near the mine entrance, half buried in the soil, is a bone. Small, white, clean. It doesn't look like an animal bone. And it's not alone. More bones scatter like forgotten coins in the dirt. You count at least 7, all clean, arranged not randomly, but in a crescent, like a ritual or a warning. You don't dig deeper. Instead, you head back to the cabin and slam the door behind you. It doesn't echo, it just closes, like the house has accepted you now, not welcomed, just acknowledged. You decide to move the table, hoping for some kind of trapdoor or message. What you find instead is something far worse. Under the table is a name scratched into the floorboards. Not carved, scratched as if someone used a fingernail or a broken nail. It's not your name this time, it's your mother's. The letters are jagged and desperate, the A in her name splintered deep into the wood. You step back, breathing shallow. The room tilts slightly, just enough to feel like you're leaning downhill even though you're not moving. A low groan rumbles through the cabin, like it's settling again, or deciding. That night you don't sleep. Instead, you build a fire and keep it high. Every so often, the flames dim, like someone is sucking the oxygen out of the room. You throw on more wood, whispering every name from the ledger you can remember, like maybe acknowledging them will hold something at bay. At midnight, the knocking resumes, but it's not 3, it's 4, then 5. Each knock sounds closer, not louder, closer. They're moving, tracing the perimeter of the room, the walls, the floor, the ceiling. You realize too late, they're not knocking to scare you. They're mapping you. They're finding where you are. And when they stop, you hear a whisper by your ear. Not in front of you, not behind you, beside you. And it says, pending. No longer. You don't scream. You can't. Your throat locks up like it's forgotten how to form sound. You twist toward the voice too fast and knock over the oil lamp. Flames kiss the floorboard for a horrifying second before dying in a puff of smoke. Lucky. Or unlucky, depending on how you define seeing what's next. But there's nothing there. No person, no shadow. Just a sensation in the air, like static clinging to your skin after pulling off a sweater in the dark. You relight the lamp with trembling fingers. It flickers back to life, reluctantly casting long shadows across the cabin walls. The floor creaks beneath your feet, even though you haven't moved. You stare at the door. You don't want to look at the window, but you do. And that's when you see her. In the pane above the table, a woman, pale, still, her face pressed close to the glass, like a child curious about candy. Her eyes are dark, too dark, as if the pupils have swallowed everything else. Her mouth is small, closed, no emotion, just waiting. You whip around to check the porch. Empty. Back to the window. She's still there. Same pose, same expression. Only now she's inside the house. At least that's what it looks like. The reflection's moved. You look out the window again, hoping, praying she's outside. But there's nothing. You inhale shakily and step away. That's when your elbow bumps something behind you, a cold draft. You turn slowly. The upstairs window, which doesn't exist. The cabin's roof has no second floor. But as you follow the lines of the wall upward, something feels off. The architecture, the way the beams meet at the top. It's almost like there was a second floor once, and something tore it away. You check the outer walls the next morning. Sure enough, you spot old nail holes where beams used to be. The wood is older than the rest of the cabin, and the grain doesn't match. There was a second story, but why is it gone? Here's a historical nugget for your sleep-deprived brain. Many mining towns built multi-level cabins during boom times to accommodate large families or more commonly boarding houses. But after collapses or violent disputes, entire levels were often dismantled to prevent squatters from taking over, or to hide what had happened upstairs. You head back into town again, shaking with that unique combination of fear and fury. You need answers. You're done playing the passive guest. You corner Clyde at the Historical Society. I saw her, you tell him, in the window, the second floor. He doesn't even blink. You saw Mary Harlan, that name again. You push. Clyde opens a drawer and pulls out a photograph. Grainy. Sepia. There she is, a woman in a simple black dress, standing just outside the cabin, arms folded in front of her. Her face is nearly blank, not expressionless, blurred. Not by age or film quality, by intention. The kind of blur you get when a face refuses to stay still on paper. She was the wife of George Harlan, Clyde says. The miner who survived the first collapse, claimed he'd dug himself out. What happened to her? Clyde shrugs. No one knows. Disappeared the week after George came back. Some say he buried her under the house. Others say she never existed at all. The town clerk insisted he'd forged the marriage record. Here's your quirky tidbit in some 19th century mining towns, especially ones isolated in the mountains. Ghost marriages were occasionally performed, a sort of folk ritual where a man would marry a spirit or even a doll, often for luck or spiritual protection. While rare, these ceremonies have shown up in frontier diaries, and bizarrely some old marriage ledgers usually crossed out in red. Historians still argue whether these unions were delusions, grief-driven coping rituals, or just grim jokes gone too far. You stare at Mary Harlan's photograph again. The shadows behind her seem wrong, angled like they're cast by two different suns. Back at the cabin, you climb into the rafters. Risky move, but you've lost all sense of caution by now. And up there, tucked between two beams, you find something wrapped in oilcloth. You bring it down. It's a porcelain doll, but not a toy. It's dressed in a tiny black morning gown. Its hands are chipped, its eyes are painted black, and around its neck a scrap of paper tied with twine. You unroll it, one word written in the same crooked handwriting as the ledger. Bride. You drop it, not from fright, from nausea, because the cloth it was wrapped in isn't oilcloth. It's a dress sleeve, human-sized. That night the knocking doesn't come from outside, or the walls, or the floor. It comes from the rafters, and it doesn't stop. Not after 3, not after 10. It goes on until dawn, until you finally scream back, "What do you want?" And a voice replies, soft, almost sad, "You promised me a home." You don't go back to sleep. You don't sit down. You just stand in the center of the cabin, staring upward, heart banging on your ribs, like it's trying to escape first. The rafters groan again, but it's not the wind. There is no wind. The air is deathly still, like the world is holding its breath to see what you'll do next. You pack a bag, half-heartedly. You tell yourself you'll leave in the morning, but you already know. The cabin won't let you, not yet. Not until you understand why. You stare at the doll still lying on the floor, the one in the black morning dress. It hasn't moved, but something about it feels heavier now, more present. The air around it seems to bend like heat waves off pavement, even though the temperature's dropped. You place it back in the rafters, not out of respect, out of survival. Then you do what no one should ever do in a ghost story you dig. Literally. With an old rusted shovel from the shed, you start breaking the frozen soil behind the cabin, right where the footprints vanished, right where the walls sighs every time the knocks start. It doesn't take long. 4 feet down, the shovel strikes wood. Not a coffin, a door. Horizontal, reinforced with iron bands. You brush away the dirt. It's not a buried room. It's a mine shaft entrance, one that was sealed from above. You pry the hatch up. It groans like it's been holding in a scream. A ladder descends into blackness. You shine your flashlight, 10 feet, maybe more. The air that rushes out smells like wrought oil and iron, like memory soaked in sweat. You descend. Welcome to the forgotten shaft. Your boots land in inches of stagnant water. The walls are close, the tunnel barely wide enough to extend your arms, but ahead it widens and branches. You follow the main path, noting shattered lanterns, broken carts, and the occasional skull graffiti painted in tar. Classic miner humor. Here's a piece of real history for your insomnia after the Colorado Mining Act of 1872. Many shafts were deemed unfit for reclamation. Translation, they were left to rot, still full of tools, or in sometimes bodies. Families were rarely informed. Mines weren't companies, they were kingdoms, and kingdoms buried their problems. You find the body 10 minutes in. Skeletal, curled against the tunnel wall, a pickaxe still clutched in one bony hand. His helmet lies beside him, the lamp long shattered. But here's the thing, he wasn't crushed. He starved. Scratches on the wall next to him, vertical lines grouped in 5s. At least 40 sets. He lived 40 nights down here. Then you see the message scrawled in coal. He lied. He said I'd be forgiven. You keep going down the side tunnel into the heart of the gulch. The deeper you go, the more the air presses against your skin. The walls seem to pulse slightly, like lungs too tired to breathe. You find another ledger. Yes, another one. This one's nailed to the wall with a rusted horseshoe. The names are all crossed out, except one. George Harlan. Next to his name, returned, debt transferred. And below that, in a different, newer hand, new balance opened. You drop the book and backtrack quickly now, but on your way out, something grabs your ankle. Not a hand, a chain. It's bolted to the ground, curled like a snake under the muck. You yank free, barely keeping your balance, and make it up the ladder in record time, slamming the hatch behind you and shoving 2 cinder blocks on top. And when you turn around, she's there again. Mary Harlan, closer now, inside the house behind the window. Only now the window isn't glass, it's open air, as if the wall never existed. You stumble inside and check the photo on the wall. Different. There are only 4 men in the mining photo now. One is missing, George Harlan. You flip it over. The back now reads debt carried forward. That night you sit by the fireplace again, too drained to even pretend to sleep. The fire flickers low, and you hear digging, not knocking, digging, beneath the house, rhythmic, insistent. You drop to your knees, press your ear to the floor. It's faint, but it's there, metal scraping stone. Then, a sound you never forget, breathing. From beneath, heavy, strained, wet. Here's your fringe fact of the night. Some miners were buried alive in collapses and survived for days by drinking condensation, eating wood fibers, even chewing leather belts. Some were found weeks later, others never. But there are stories always whispered of knockers who never stopped digging, who didn't die, who just kept tunneling. Historians still argue whether this was metaphor for guilt, or if those knockers still exist in the earth half-man half-memory, trapped between now and then. The breathing stops. You lift your head, and the fireplace long cold flashes to life. In the flames you swear you see her face again. Not Mary, yours, mouth open, screaming. You wake up on the floor, your skin damp with sweat, throat hoarse, like you've been shouting for hours, but you don't remember making a sound. The fire is dead again. Nothing but cold ashes in the hearth. Morning light cuts through the window in that same sharp, unforgiving slant, like the sun itself is suspicious of this place. You sit up slowly listening. Nothing. No digging. No breathing. No knocking. You almost think it's over, until you notice the new marks on the floor. Boot prints. Larger than yours. Deeper. They lead from the fireplace to the table, then vanish halfway to the door. And on the table, a key. Brass. Ancient. The teeth are jagged like fangs, and it's tied with twine that looks freshly cut. You don't remember placing it there. You know it wasn't there last night, but you recognize it because it's carved into the cover of the ledger you found days ago. The same pattern, the same twisted, impossible-to-copy edges. You hold it in your palm, and the cabin seems to lean slightly like a dog perking up at the sound of its name. The air thickens, the walls seem closer, and behind you, faint and impossible, a door creaks open. But there is no other door. Until now, you follow the sound and find it a hidden panel behind the stove. Not just warped wood this time, but a full door. A door you've walked past 20 times and never seen. The brass handle is cold and familiar. The key fits perfectly. Of course it does. It opens with a sigh. Beyond it is a staircase that spirals downward into blackness far deeper than the cabin should allow. You descend. The walls are stone, now sweating with condensation. lined with old gas lamps that flicker to life as you pass them. You don't ask why, you're past why. This is the heart of Whisper Gulch. The descent takes minutes, maybe hours. Time warps in the dark, but eventually you reach a cavern. And in that cavern is a chapel. Yes, a chapel. Stone pews, a crumbled altar, and stained glass windows underground, somehow glowing with light from nowhere. The images are grotesque parodies of saints miners, with skull faces, women, veiled in ash, children holding empty bowls. But the centerpiece, the main image, is unmistakable. It's you, standing in the cabin doorway, mouth open in horror, and beside you, a man with no face. You step back, trip over something soft, a body, fresh, still warm. He's wearing modern hiking gear. His ID is still in his wallet. He came here before you, but he didn't make it far. You back away and run your light across the pews. More bodies, some skeletal, some recent, all seated as if attending some grim sermon. You approach the altar. There's something carved into the stone behind layers of soot and grime. You wipe it clean. A single phrase, "Debt never dies." That's when you hear the footsteps. Not boots this time, bare feet, padding across the stone. Soft, slow, deliberate. You shine your light. Nothing, but you feel it. The air bends around it. The cold creeps in, not like wind, but like presence. You whisper, "Who are you?" The answer comes from inside your mind. Not in words, in weight, in understanding. This isn't about George Harlan, or Mary, or any of the others. It's about the promise, the vow made in blood, sweat, and salt, that no miner would ever leave his debt unpaid. That if one escaped, the cost would be passed to the next, and the next, and the next, until someone paid it willingly. You step back toward the stairs, but they're gone. The wall where the staircase was is now stone. Seamless, no exit. Here's your historical hook for the night. During the Panic of 1893, hundreds of miners across the American West simply vanished. Families searched, Pinkertons searched, but some were never found. Some say they ran. Others say they were buried in purpose-built collapse chambers to prevent Union talk from reaching other camps. Historians still argue whether those chambers ever truly existed, or if they were metaphor for what the land takes when pushed too far. You sit in the chapel, surrounded by the dead, and you realize you were never a guest. You were invited. The ledger, the knocking, the whispers. They weren't warnings, they were courtship, and you've already accepted. Back at the cabin, miles above you, in a world where clocks still tick, and birds still sing of photo changes. The one of the four miners, now it's 5 again. But this time, the fifth figure looks just like you. The chapel is quiet now. That oppressive silence, the kind that presses in around your ears, makes your own heartbeat feel like a drum in a cavern. You stand in the middle of that forgotten sanctuary, feeling the weight of time, of death, of expectation. You're not alone, but you are, because what's down here with you doesn't wear skin. You run your fingers along the wall, searching desperately for some crack, some hidden seam, anything that might open. But the stone is solid, ancient, cold enough to burn your fingertips. Then you notice the altar again. It has a drawer. Of course it does. You slide it open. Inside is a pocket watch, silver heavy and still ticking. Ticking in perfect silence. You bring it to your ear. The sound is there, but only in your head. It's stuck at one time, 12:03 a.m. You freeze. That's the time the knocking always begins. The time the mine collapse happened. The time everything in this cursed town seems to hinge on. You flip the watch over, inscribed on the back in delicate cursive. Let the hour repeat until paid in full. The ticking stops. A sound rises behind you, soft, wooden. Chimes. You turn to see a grandfather clock, massive, ornate, standing in the far corner of the chapel, where you swear nothing stood before. The glass is cracked, the pendulum still, and yet the chimes ring out, once, twice, then silence. You check the face. It reads 12:03. You approach it slowly, each footstep echoing like a warning. The wood is black walnut, but scorched along the edges. You touch the face. It's warm. There's something inside the clock behind the gears. You pry open the glass reach-in and pull out a photograph. It's another group shot, just like the one in the cabin. But this one has dozens of faces, all seated, all in that chapel, all staring dead ahead. The first row is skeletons, the second mummified, the third people you recognize, Mary Harlan George, even Clyde the historian. And in the back row, you, smiling. You drop the photo, it burns away before it hits the floor. Then the lights go out, all of them. The chapel vanishes into black. You feel the floor vanish too, not physically, but emotionally. Like you're no longer standing on stone, but on memory. The smell of ash returns, the faint metallic tang of blood, the whispering. Thousands of voices now. One overlaps them all, the same one that whispered to you that first night. Do you remember your debt? No, you whisper, I never owed anything. But it's a lie, and you know it. Because your family did come from this area, didn't they? Your grandfather, the one no one talked about. Didn't he disappear on a camping trip when your dad was a kid? Didn't your mother warn you, never go near the Rockies alone? You dig deeper into your memory, the stories, the bad dreams, the journal you found when you were 12 and too scared to finish reading. The one with drawings of a cabin that looked exactly like this one. The debt isn't financial, it's ancestral, blood for blood. The lights flicker back on, but you're no longer in the chapel. You're standing in the cabin again. Except now it's not abandoned. It's 1883. The wallpaper is new. The table is polished. Men laugh around a bottle of whiskey. A woman cooks stew. A child runs through the hallway giggling. And they see you. They don't question your clothes, your eyes, your sudden appearance. Because you're one of them now. You look down. Your hands are calloused, soot under your nails. Your reflection in the window shows a different face. The voice returns. This is where it begins. Here's your historical fact. Time loops have been part of indigenous American folklore for centuries. Spirit traps, where souls are caught in repeating tragedy until balance is restored. Some scholars think these stories influenced later ghost lore during the Western expansion. Historians still argue whether these tales were metaphors for trauma or warnings we should have taken seriously. You try to move, but you can't. Your body isn't yours anymore. You're back in the mine, torch in hand. The collapse hasn't happened yet, but it will. And you now understand why George Harlan survived. He made a deal. He transferred the debt. He passed the burden on. You stare at your crew, these laughing men who don't know what's coming. And you wonder, do you warn them? Or do you do what George did? A bell rings in the distance. Lunch break. You follow the others up the shaft back toward the sunlight you once knew. And as you cross the threshold, into the brightness, you hear the knocking. 3 times, not in the past, now, from inside the cabin wall. And you wake up in your sleeping bag alone again, or so you think, until you look at the photo, and now you're in every version. You stare at the photograph in stunned silence. Every time you blink, the image shifts. One moment, it's the sepia-toned group from 1883. Blink again, and it's color modern. Blink once more, and you're watching yourself in real time, sitting in the same chair, in the same cabin, holding the same photo. It's not a picture anymore. It's a mirror, and something just moved behind you. You don't turn right away. You've learned by now that's what it wants. Instead, you stare at your reflection in the glass, tracking the shadow, shifting slowly across the room. It stops just behind your shoulder and whispers, "You stayed the night. You opened the ledger. You dug where we warned you not to dig. You answered the knock. You finally speak." Voice low, raw. "What do you want from me?" No reply, just breathing. Then, "We want what you brought." You stand, shake your head. "I didn't bring anything." But you did. You brought yourself. You brought bloodline. You brought the debt that's been circling this place like a hawk since the first pickaxe hit stone. It just needed someone to say yes. And here's the twist, saying yes didn't require words. It was enough that you stayed, that you listened, that you cared, that you believed. You run out of the cabin, into the woods, into daylight. But the trees feel wrong. Too tall, too close. They weren't like this before. You walk 10 minutes, 20, and somehow still end up back at the clearing. You try again. Different direction, same result. The town is gone. The road vanished. The gravel under your feet unfamiliar. You're in Whisper Gulch. But Whisper Gulch isn't in your world anymore. You sit on a stump, try to gather your breath, your thoughts. That's when you notice it. The knocking. Again, but it's coming from your bag. You open it slowly. Inside is the ledger, not the burned one, not the one from the chimney. A new one, unmarked, pristine, bound in black leather with brass corners. And your fingers are already stained with ink. You open to the first page, your name, your birth date, your face sketched with brutal precision. Below it, balance pending. You flip through, each page is blank waiting, expectant, like it's ready to record. Because now, you're the witness. That's your new role, to document the next arrival, the next poor soul who hears the story, follows the map, books the wrong Airbnb. You're not trapped in the past. You're the bridge between. Here's your historical anchor in early Appalachian coal towns. Every mining camp had a night caller, a person designated to knock on doors before dawn when a death or collapse had happened. The knock was always 3 times, no more, no less. To prevent panic, the knockers never spoke. In Whisper Gulch, the knocker never left. Because the debt never ended. Historians still argue whether the caller was real or an invention to rationalize why some people were always the first to die. The forest eventually recedes. You're back at the cabin, only now it looks different, restored. The porch is new, the wood sanded and sealed. There's smoke rising from the chimney. You walk up the steps slowly, cautiously, each footfall oddly familiar. You open the door and find yourself inside. Literally, there you are, sitting at the table, scribbling in the ledger. You look up, smile, but the smile isn't right. You say nothing, neither do you. The doppelganger version of you walks toward the wall and knocks. 3 times, and you understand. You're not the witness. You're the welcome. You're the one who greets the new ones now. The cabin never needed a ghost. It needed a host. The photo on the wall has changed again. Now it's not a group shot. Now it's just you, standing alone at the cabin door. Behind you, a shadow faint and waiting. You whisper, "Who's next?" The cabin answers with silence, until it doesn't, until there's a soft rustle from outside. Leaves crunching. Boots, someone new, approaching. You smile and knock. You knock once, twice, 3 times, then silence. Just like it always was, just like it always will be. On the other side of the door, you hear hesitant steps, gravel shifting, breath being held. You know that kind of silence intimately. Now it's the pause between disbelief and acceptance, between fear and curiosity. You remember it well. It was yours not long ago. The door creaks open, and there they are. Backpack, boots, tired eyes, a face full of too many questions. The kind of person who'd say, "I don't believe in ghost stories," just a little too loud, just a little too late. You don't speak. You don't have to. You simply gesture them in with a tilt of the head and a glance toward the table where the fire already crackles in welcome. They step inside. The door shuts behind them gently, almost affectionately. And in that moment, time shifts again. Not backward, not forward, but sideways. Because that's what this place does. It folds time like a bedsheet, smooths out wrinkles in history, and tucks you inside like a secret. It doesn't trap you, it adopts you. You sit across from the newcomer who looks around and says something innocuous like, "Wow, this place is in better shape than I thought." You nod. Most people think it's abandoned. You leave it at that, because from now on, their story will mirror yours. A knock, a voice, a whisper in the rafters. The photograph that keeps changing, the chapel below, the impossible time, the debt that echoes across generations. And you'll be there for all of it, watching, writing, welcoming. You've accepted the role, or maybe the role accepted you. Here's your final piece of twisted history. Some mining towns used to maintain a single empty house even after the boom was over and the miners long gone. A place with no name on the deed, no listed owner, but always kept just clean enough to feel alive. The locals called it the anchor. They'd say as long as that house stands, the town remembers itself. Some say it was for returning spirits. Others say it was for future ones. Historians still argue whether these traditions were acts of grief or rituals of maintenance, like feeding a fire that must never go out. And now you understand. You are the keeper of the flame. The ledger lies open on the table again. A pen rests beside it, and across from you the newcomer finally asks the question they always ask. "So, do you live here?" You smile and say only for now, because that's all anyone gets in Whisper Gulch. A now. You both sip tea that neither of you remember brewing, and outside the wind picks up for the first time in days. It carries the faintest sound, something you once feared, but now find comforting. Knocking, far away, echoing, faint, but coming. Always coming. Word count 1:12. Wind down 300 words. And now the knocks have stopped for tonight at least. You sit back, letting the silence wrap around you like a warm blanket, soft and slow. The cabin breathes again, but not in fear, in rhythm, as though it's just another heartbeat beneath the earth, steady and familiar. The story, strange and spiraling, begins to fade. Not because it's over, but because you're being released for now. Like a miner at the end of shift, your lantern dimmed your boots. Muddy and your mind full of strange noises in the dark. You've gone deep tonight, into the past, into fear, into places where time forgets to move forward. Let that stillness settle now. Let your breath slow. The figures in the chapel are at rest. The ledger is closed. The knocking has grown distant like thunder, long after the lightning has passed, and even the ghosts, persistent as they are, have retreated to whatever fold of memory they crawl into when they're not whispering secrets to the curious. You're safe here for now. Let your eyes drift closed. Let the dark become gentle. And if you dream, maybe, just maybe, you'll walk that forest again. Maybe you'll see the chapel lit by lanterns. Maybe you'll even knock back soft and curious. Just 3 times, nothing more. Sleep well, keeper of stories. Sleep well, witness of debts. Sleep well and dream deep. End of script. Sweet dreams.